Sometimes it really hits you how much buildings shape our world. We might not always think about them, but they're a constant presence.
They really are.
So today we're diving deep into the world of construction in Romania.
Sounds fascinating.
It is. We've got Ionut Maries as our expert.
Oh, I know Ionut. He's fantastic. Really knows his stuff.
Yeah, he's a senior urban development consultant who's done a lot of work on...
Right, urban planning?
Exactly. And we've got his research on Romania's building boom to dig into.
His understanding of urban trends, especially across the EU, is really impressive.
It really is, and that's what makes this deep dive so interesting.
Definitely.
Get this. Since 1975, Romania's total building volume has practically doubled.
Wow, that's a staggering increase.
It really is. It's like they built a whole other Romania on top of the existing one.
Just in buildings. That's mind-blowing.
Right, and what's really interesting is that this boom isn't just limited to, say, apartments in city centers.
Right. You usually think of those massive apartment blocks.
Exactly. But this is both residential and commercial construction booming, although in different ways.
Now that you mention it, I am curious to understand how those growth patterns differ. What's the story there?
Well, it's all about how cities evolve and how people's needs and desires change over time.
Makes sense. Things are always in flux.
Exactly. So as cities like Bucharest and Cluj-Napoca, which are some of Romania's largest cities.
Right, major urban centers.
Exactly. As these cities become more crowded and expensive, people naturally start looking for more space and affordability.
Sure, the classic trade-off.
Right, and that often leads them to areas just outside the city limits.
So we're talking about a sort of suburban sprawl, but on a Romanian scale.
Exactly. But it's not just individuals and families driving this trend.
Oh, really? Who else is involved?
Businesses are also seeing the appeal of these peri-urban areas.
Interesting. What's drawing them out there?
Well, for one thing, land is cheaper.
That makes sense.
Um,
Overhead costs can be a major factor for businesses.
Absolutely. And being close to major roads and transportation hubs is also a huge advantage for businesses.
Sure. Makes it easier to transport goods and for employees to commute.
Exactly. It's all about strategic location.
So it seems like this trend benefits both individuals and businesses in different ways.
It does, but it also presents a really interesting challenge for urban planners.
I bet. How do you manage that kind of growth without creating chaos?
Exactly. Because if everyone's moving to the outskirts, what happens to the cities themselves?
Right. Do they just become ghost towns?
That's a key question, and it's where the concept of functional urban areas, or FUAs, comes in.
FUAs. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about those.
Essentially, it's recognizing that a city isn't an island.
Good point. They're all part of a larger ecosystem.
Exactly. It's all connected. And FUAs aim to manage that interconnectedness in a way that benefits everyone.
So it's about understanding that what happens in the suburbs affects the city and vice versa.
Precisely. And it requires a different way of thinking about urban planning.
Definitely a more holistic approach, I imagine.
Exactly. So instead of just focusing on the city center, you have to consider the needs of the entire region.
Makes sense. It's about creating more integrated and sustainable urban fabric.
You got it. And that's what makes this topic so fascinating. It's not just about buildings, it's about understanding the forces that shape our cities and how we can create a better future for everyone.
I completely agree. It's a topic with far-reaching implications.
It really is. And that's just scratching the surface. There's so much more to explore.
It's like trying to solve a giant jigsaw puzzle.
That's a great analogy.
You got all these different pieces, cities, suburbs, businesses, residents, and they all need to fit together in a way that makes sense.
And I imagine there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Exactly. Each functional urban area is going to have its own unique set of challenges and opportunities.
So where do you even begin? How do you start putting this puzzle together?
Well, one of the most important things is recognizing that cities don't exist in a vacuum.
Right. They're
Mhm.
part of a larger ecosystem.
Exactly. And a World Bank report actually highlighted this point. They found that Romanian cities generate a whopping 90% of national firm revenues.
Wow. So they're really the economic engines of the country.
They are, but here's the catch. To stay competitive, they need to work together with their surrounding areas.
So it's not enough for a city to just focus on its own growth.
Exactly. It has to think about the bigger picture. How can it collaborate with its suburbs to create a more prosperous and sustainable region?
It's like a rising tide lifts all boats.
It is, precisely. And that's where the concept of functional urban areas really comes into play.
Because it's about recognizing that interconnectedness.
Exactly. For example, people might live in the suburbs but workshop or enjoy cultural events in the city.
Right, and businesses on the outskirts might rely on the skilled workforce or infrastructure that the city provides.
The two-way street.
It makes you realize how interconnected everything really is.
It does. But recognizing the interconnectedness is only the first step.
Right. Then comes the hard part of actually making it work.
Exactly. And that's where things can get tricky.
Because now you're talking about getting different local governments to agree on a shared vision.
And that's not always easy, let's be honest.
It sounds like herding cats.
Sometimes it can feel that way, but when it works, the benefits can be huge.
So how do you make it work? What are some concrete examples of successful cross-jurisdictional cooperation?
Well, imagine a small town located just outside a major city. They want to attract new businesses and create jobs. So they decide to build an industrial park.
Okay, that makes sense.
But they might not have the resources or the expertise to do it alone.
So that's where collaboration comes in.
Precisely. They can partner with the city to secure funding, attract investors, and develop the necessary infrastructure.
So it becomes a win-win situation.
Exactly. The
Cool.
town gets the support it needs, the city gains a strategically located business hub, and investors are more likely to come on board when they see a region that's working together.
It's about creating a network effect.
Exactly. And that interconnectedness goes beyond just administrative boundaries.
Oh, you mean like physical infrastructure?
Precisely. We're talking about efficient transportation networks that seamlessly connect urban and peri-urban areas.
So things like high-speed trains, expanded bus routes, maybe even those bike paths that everyone seems to love these days.
Exactly. It's about making it easier, more efficient, and more appealing for people to move between the city and the suburbs.
Because nobody wants to be stuck in traffic for hours on end.
Exactly. And these kinds of infrastructure improvements benefit everyone in the long run.
It's not just about making commutes more bearable, though, is it?
No, it's not. It's about connecting people to opportunities,
Right.
whether it's access to better jobs, education, cultural experiences, or even just a wider range of leisure activities.
It's about creating a more integrated and equitable urban fabric.
Exactly. One where everyone has a chance to thrive regardless of where they live.
So you've talked about creating these functional urban areas, these interconnected regions, but I imagine it's not as simple as just connecting the dots on a map.
You're absolutely right. It's a complex process.
Right.
And one of the biggest challenges is ensuring that the benefits of this growth are shared equitably.
Right, because if a booming economy just leads to skyrocketing housing costs for people in those peri-urban areas, well, kind of defeats the purpose, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's something Ionut highlighted in his research. He found that as new businesses move in and create jobs, rents in the surrounding areas tend to go up.
Which makes sense in a way, basic supply and demand.
Right. But it means that without careful planning, the very people these FUAs are meant to benefit could end up priced out of their own communities.
So it's like a balancing act, trying to foster economic growth while also protecting affordability and quality of life.
Exactly. And that's where those 7 key recommendations that Ionut outlined in his research become so important.
Right, those recommendations. Can you walk us through some of the key ones?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, we've got strengthening the private sector.
Okay. What does that look like in practice?
It's about creating a business-friendly environment that encourages investment and makes it easier for entrepreneurs to start and grow their businesses.
Because a strong economy is the foundation for everything else, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need that solid base to build upon. And speaking of building, investing in sustainable and connected infrastructure is absolutely crucial.
Right, we were talking about transportation earlier, but it's more than that, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. It's also about ensuring reliable utilities like electricity and water. It's about having high-speed internet access. And let's not forget about effective waste management systems.
All those essential services that we often take for granted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they make all the difference in creating livable and sustainable communities. And speaking of creating livable communities, we can't forget about quality of life initiatives.
Because at the end of the day, people want to live in places that are not just economically viable, but also enjoyable and fulfilling.
Exactly. It's about creating vibrant public spaces, fostering a thriving arts and culture scene, and promoting sustainable living practices.
So it's about more than just surviving. It's about thriving.
Precisely. And a big part of creating that thriving environment is good governance.
Okay, so we're talking about transparency, accountability, that sort of thing.
All of that. But it's also about actively engaging citizens in the planning process, making sure their voices are heard and that their concerns are being addressed.
Because trust is a two-way street, right? Citizens need to feel like they're part of the solution.
Exactly. When citizens feel heard and respected, they're more likely to support their local government's initiatives and contribute to their community's well-being.
It's about creating a shared sense of ownership and responsibility for the future of their city.
Absolutely. And that's something that's really come through in Einut's research. The importance of citizen engagement in creating successful, functional urban areas.
It's been a fascinating deep dive. You know, when we first started talking about Romanian construction, I wouldn't have imagined we'd end up discussing things like citizen engagement and quality of life.
It's all connected, though, isn't it?
It really is. It just goes to show that creating thriving cities and regions is about so much more than just bricks and mortar.
Exactly. It's about people. It's
It
about
really,
collaboration. And it's about having a vision for the future that benefits everyone.
and I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Romanian construction and urban development.
My pleasure. It's been a great conversation.
It really has, and we hope you've enjoyed listening. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep building a better future.